We're going to be transcribing this as well. That's handy. But yeah, welcome everybody. Yeah, today we're really going to just try and cut through the noise and tackling something that's quietly wrecking productivity and budgets and morale. It's the issue of turnover. And we're not just talking about it, we're going to give you tools to fix it as well. So it's what it says on the tin. We're going to talk about employee turnover and how to fix it. And Clint always reminds us of this analogy of a leaky bucket, so I had to put that here. So he was head of recruitment for a while, and he was sick of the bucket leaking, hiring hundreds of people and watching them sometimes head out the door. So we're very familiar with that image. But a little bit about us. So I suppose as former senior HR leaders ourselves, we know the job is tough, and you're juggling stakeholders and people challenges and constantly proving your value. Our job is to make that whole thing simpler, faster, and way more human. So there's a little bit of a quick intro and a background about who we are. My name's Ryan McGrory. My background is in communications, well-being, gamification, analytics, and marketing psychology. So I wasn't really what you'd call a typical HR person, but I did spend 11 years in HR, mostly at UE Insurance as head of employee experience, well-being, and comms there. And I used all my experience to develop and drew from all my experience to develop their multi-award winning programs and strategies that help to improve people performance and employee experience and turnover and engagement, helping UE to become the most successful and award-winning HR team in the company during that period. And left about 4 years ago to start Exsona. And it was actually, I should introduce you to Clint now. It was actually at UE that I started working alongside Clint. He's going to co-host today, but let me shut up, Clint. You want to introduce yourself?
I just only add that I probably wasn't the typical HR person either. So I came from sort of academia and organizational psychology and somehow landed in a head of recruitment role and learned heaps and had lots of fun working alongside Ryan and others. And this topic, especially employee turnover, was like the bane of my existence when I was in recruitment, because I came up with the leaky bucket analogy because, man, it was tough on me and my team when lots and lots of people were leaving, and it was just that sort of treadmill of, constantly replacing. So I love this topic. I thought a lot about how to fix it over the years.
Nice one. Excellent. So that's about us at Exsona. I'll be really quickly. We don't do fluffy HR. We like to call ourselves a bit of a social term, but workforce success legends. And that's because that's who we want to work with. We want to work with other legends that are serious about actually helping HR and getting the best out of HR to get real outcomes and the things that actually matter. That's just a brief intro about us. The core, this is really the core of what we believe. If your people strategy or your people strategies aren't measurable, then it's just a glorified to-do list. So today, that's what we're going to focus on. I'm going to focus on the numbers and the measurement and actually doing things to fix the issues. So we work with the best HR leaders in the business that are growing or changing, and the ones who are done with surface level stuff and actually want to move the dial. And these are just a few companies that we've helped achieve results in the last little while, and a few of the things that we usually work in, and a few of the problems that we help to fix. And yes, we've won a heap of awards over the last few years, as I mentioned. That's our wrap list. And it's not just awards that we get, but with our clients, we help get real results that help improve attraction, engagement, well-being, and retention. So here's just some of the recent ones that we're really proud of. And this isn't to show off to you. Well, all right, maybe it is a little bit more so. It's to show that our methods actually work, and we've seen them work across sectors, across industries, and across multiple challenges. So that's what we're going to share today. We're going to share our method. We're going to share the framework that we've used to tackle this specific problem with multiple organizations. And we're going to give you the tools that we've used so you can go off and get similar results in your own environment. So I suppose this is the segue slide. This is like, all right, well, that's about you. What the F are we actually doing here? Well, enough about us. This is what you're going to get. So you're going to walk away with our 5D method. So we'll run through that in a sec. We're going to give you a cost calculator that you can actually show your execs or your CFO. We're going to give you a business case template if you need it, and a chance to work with us directly as well, either on this problem or just helping you through yours. So I suppose big question is, why does this matter? Well, two big reasons, and one is it costs a shitload. About 3.8 billion is lost every year to turnover in Australia. And the second is most businesses aren't even measuring it. It's just it's not just a cost for businesses, but it's sometimes a blind spot. So these are the two things that we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on removing the blind spot. I'm going to focus on how you improve and how you reduce or those costs in your business. So turnover doesn't just hit the budget. So I showed that big scary figure before, but it doesn't just hit the budget. It hits culture, hits performance, and it impacts customers as well. And it creates a domino effect that's really hard to stop, because once it starts, it's really difficult. And we call that thing the shit loop. And really what happens is, you can see from the diagram, but one person leaves and then everything starts slipping. So productivity, trust, service, energy. And usually just when you think things are stabilizing, then that's when someone else walks. So this is a pretty common story. This loop is pretty familiar with most people that have been in HR for a little bit of time. And I know the stories that we immediately think of are when there's a bad culture or a toxic leader. So the type of situation or environment that encourages an exodus of people who say, fuck this, I'm out of here. And this is super dangerous. If you've got a bad culture, you get toxic leaders, that does encourage people to leave. But even the best run teams with a great culture are also at risk of this loop as well. So I think in my time as a junior working in a small agency where this was the case, we had great leaders, we had a great team, we're busy, we're doing great work, and we're really tight knit. So everything was going really well. But then someone left. It was our top performer, the person that was absolutely killing it. Was doing like 3-4 times the workload of the average person, and it created a huge gap. Like overnight, almost immediately, everyone else's workload increased, and there was so much overspill, and that created some indecision, and things were unclear. And before long, a few of us, and the leaders included, were burning out. There's no time for the usual banter or the usual mucking around, the things other than just constant work. So morale tanked, and so did our performance after a while. And then before we knew it, a few other people had left. And it doesn't take long, especially in smaller teams, for this trend to start. And once it starts, it is like that domino effect. It can be really difficult to stop. And really, this is the cost of turnover that we don't usually put on paper, but it's the one that your people feel the most. And if this sounds familiar, then I'm sorry, but good. We're going to be trying to break that today. You're in the right place. And I might hand over to Clint. Actually, you're going to take us through the kind of fix it formula, so the 5D method that we use.
Yeah, so this is our basic methodology that we've been applying for the last few years to pretty much every HR or people challenge or problem, and we've got it refined pretty well, and it really works, I suppose, is the main point. And I won't go through the detail, because I'll explain how each of these steps apply specifically to the problem of employee turnover, but we call it the 5D methodology. The names are pretty, they give you a fair idea of what's happening. So it's discover, develop, design, deliver, and data. So can you flick to the next one, Ryan?
Yeah, just add that it's completely plagiarized from the movie Dodgeball as well. I think they get the 5D method.
Duck, dodge, yep. We don't throw wrenches at people, right? So not often enough sometimes. But we've done up some sort of recipe cards, really, to explain how to apply each of these steps. And the first step is discovery, and pretty logical, right? The first step is get your head around what's really going on. And that's, you can do that in a bunch of different ways, but we always like to start with data. So diving into the numbers, and then, add to that talking to people, whether it's leaders or employees, looking at your existing strategies or initiatives and figuring out what's working and what's not, and ultimately trying to get to the root causes of what's driving the turnover. Now, you can achieve this in, 1 to 2 weeks, all things going well. There's a bit of work in it, And particularly, depending on the size of the business and how much data, et cetera, that you've got. So we've said it's probably a medium level of difficulty. And what you're really going to need is it's data. Obviously, your turnover data, but other sources of data as well, like exit surveys or 360 surveys or engagement surveys. As much data as you can get your hands on, to be honest. And we've added in here, using our turnover calculator at this stage, which Ryan's going to share in a few minutes, is really handy just to put a number, an estimated figure on like what it's actually costing the business. And when you've got your data, our typical approach is to split it into, meaningful groups. So like based on organizational structure, you might look at, high level business units, departments, teams, those sorts of splits. But you can also look by locations or by tenure. It can be interesting because you might find that turnover tends to peak at a certain point in tenure. And we've definitely seen that before. The idea here is get stuck in, try to figure out what the data can tell you, and then pair that with some focus groups or one-on-one interviews or whatever it is that you need to try and get to like what's really going on here. Why are people leaving? So the next stage we call develop, and develop and design are the next two, and they're related, but this is all about starting to map out a plan. So in the develop stage, you want to get really clear around what are you trying to fix and what's the goal. And, reducing turnover sounds nice, but doesn't really mean anything. The more specific you can be, the better. So for example, it might be, we want to reduce turnover by 10% in our sales department because that's where the leaky bucket is. So get clear on the objectives and then start sort of ideating, I suppose, on what solutions might be that actually address the root causes. And this is where you can get a bit creative. And then you want to evaluate and prioritize those ideas or solutions. You can do this pretty quickly. We've done this sort of exercise in a half-day workshop, but it might take you up to a week. So you don't want to do this in isolation either. So I think it said there, Ryan, invite some creative ideas people into this process because that's always helpful. If you just do it by yourself, you're probably going to be limited. And yes, even invite the cynical people too, because they can still have some good ideas. So we've, out of a session like this where we're trying to come up with solutions, we've often come up with 30 to 50. So you can come up with heaps, and someone's always got the great idea of, hey, like, why don't we just pay everyone 20% more? Now that's a great idea, but the reality is it might not work. So we typically go through a process of prioritization of ideas. So that's on the next one, Ryan. And this is our way of doing it. It's just a simple matrix of effort versus impact. So the example of, hey, let's pay everyone 20% more would be a high effort or high resource idea. Impact, look, it might actually be reasonable in the short term. It's probably not a long-term solution because it probably doesn't address underlying root causes, but it's probably, not going to be in the do it now bucket, right? So we like to plot all of the ideas out and just try to prioritize to the ones where hopefully there's a few short wins, short, quick wins, high impact, low effort ideas, and you can just do it now. There'll probably be a few larger, a bit more time and effort, but pretty impactful solutions as well. And, ideally you get your list down and you figure out there's some stuff that, yeah, look, nice idea, but it's just not going to be realistic in practice. So on to the next stage is design. And this is getting into the nitty gritty of your plan. So you've got some ideas that you think are going to address the root causes. Now we're going to get right into the detail. And this is about mapping out the execution, formalizing what that plan is and getting the engagement or the buy-in that you need, because more than likely there's going to be multiple stakeholders involved in this stuff. This can take a bit of time. Again, a week or two, depending on how much internal, influencing you have to do. And we reckon it's sort of a medium level of difficulty. You got to get this bit right, or you're just not going to be able to execute on your plan. So what you've got to identify here is, you know, who are the stakeholders? What are the things that need to happen in order for your plans to be approved? You know, you want to get into a document or a formal plan that you can share and get feedback on. So this is all the nitty gritty, right? And this is timelines and resources and how much money and all the rest of it. So once you've got that in place, the next stage is, it is what it says, is deliver or execute. And if you've done all of the preceding steps right, it should just be a matter of rolling things out. So just delivering on the plan. And look, what we've said is that the time for this can vary because it depends on what the solutions are, right? Ideally, there's some quick wins, you know, some small initiatives that you can roll out, you know, tomorrow or next week. But often there's some larger ones that might take, you know, weeks to months to actually execute on. So the timeline varies. And we've said that the difficulty of this can be high because, like with a lot of things, with a lot of strategies, you know, plans look really good on paper, but when it comes to doing, they can fall over. So this requires a bit of kind of grit and sticking with it usually to see things through. So, you know, you can over-engineer these things. And we always say, look, you know, you don't need a Gantt chart empire to deliver on this. Just get stuck in and get moving. And the last step in our methodology is data, and it's the one that often gets missed as well. So people come up with the plan, they execute on it, and then they kind of walk away and get busy with other things. But it's really important that there's some ongoing sort of tracking and monitoring that happens. Obviously, turnover's the thing you want to really track. But you, depending on what you've come up with, you might have some other metrics like employee engagement or absenteeism, or, you know, all sorts of things, depending on what you want to measure. And if you've got in place some initiatives that are taking a bit of time, you want to be able to track those in terms of progress. So this is, you know, this is the bit where you figure out if your initiatives or ideas are working or not as well. And that's really important because some won't, right? We come up with good plans and good initiatives. Sometimes they don't work. So it's important to keep track of what's happening so you can adjust if you need to. Typically, you know, monthly tracking or reporting is probably the bare minimum, right, to keep a handle on things. And you don't know how long this is going to take. So whenever we've worked with businesses, we like to set up dashboards or regular reporting. So, you know, it kind of never goes away. Because one of the issues is you do all this work and you fix things and you go, all right, oh, it's fine. And then you kind of forget about it for a while. And 2 years later, you're in the same spot and because you've taken your eye off the ball. So, you know, for us, the data, you know, like we said at the start, that's probably the thing that has the most value, both in figuring out what's going on and tracking progress. So this little slide here just kind of brings all that together in a one-pager. So, you know, discovers getting in, figuring out what the facts are, what are people saying, what does the data tell you. Then it's about setting up designing a plan, delivering on that plan and monitoring. So, you know, there's a bit in it, but you could do all that, you know, in a month if you were going really hard and you took some ownership of it. So that's the DIY model, right? So I think it's over to Ryan now, who will talk you through our turnover calculator so you can figure out what turnover is actually costing you.
Yes, cheers, Clint. So I'm going to take you through this now, everyone. I'm going to send you a link to this. You'll be able to do it with your own numbers, and you know you can do it in your own time. But I'll share it just now, just as an example, so you know how it works. Although it is fairly intuitive, but really the tool just shows you the real cost of doing nothing. So what your turnover data might be what your turnover might be costing you right now. And it's a really good one if you're sharing it with a CEO or a CFO to get support for making a change, which is usually the first step. If you know where you're at right now and you know your current state, then the next thing is how do you get agreement or buy-in for making a change. So this is the turnover calculator here, and I'll just plug in some numbers and show you how to use it. But often businesses track percentage or number of people leaving. This tries to quantify that in dollar terms, so you can get a full picture of what the cost of turnover is. So it starts off with by looking at your annual salary, or your average annual salary per employee. So in Australia, the average full-time salary, we've got little tool tips here that will guide you if you don't know your specific data, but the average annual salary for a full-time worker is about $102,000 per ABS data. So if I key in 100 grand there, then it'll then take me and ask me about what the annual turnover rate is. So on average, it's about 14% in Australia. So that's what the ABS data tells us, that on average 14% annualized turnover is what Australian businesses are experiencing right now as per February 2024. How many employees? You key in how many employees are in your organization, or just roughly. So I'll just go with 500 just now. Then ask about the cost, the total cost of hiring an employee. So this isn't just what you might be paying in recruiting or promoting a role, but it's the total cost of the whole recruitment process. So whatever you're spending on advertising, recruitment, on agency fees, and on interviews. And there's some good benchmark data for this that's out there. You can Google your own industry, and that is available. Depending on the role, or the roles that you're attracting on average, might depend on your average costs. But they say manufacturing roles are about 15K to hire, tech roles are about 53K. So it varies depending on what type of business that you are and what roles you're recruiting for most commonly. But just to choose an average figure, I'll choose 20 grand. And then it's about what you're spending on onboarding. So that additional cost to onboard someone. So uniforms, training, equipment, travel, whatever it is you do as part of your onboarding experience to bring people to your organization. What's that number? You might have it. If not, there's some estimates in here. So small businesses typically spend 5, large businesses spend about 10 or more. So we'll go for 5 grand, we'll be conservative here. And then the last thing is the time to reach full productivity. So an estimated, really, this figure is trying to estimate the productivity loss due to turnover. So if it takes, say, an entry-level role, but 1 to 3 months, we can put that figure in here. If it takes your high impact roles 9 months and more to be fully productive, you can put that in here, or the time lost that you're usually expecting to hire. So put 3 months in there, and then the results it spits out is the number of employees that are leaving each year based on your headcount and the total percentage of turnover, and then the cost of turnover per employee. So it's about 50K. And then the total annual cost, so how much that's costing you to lose 70 people per year. We've got some scenarios down here as well. So this is the good stuff if you're asking for budget to then go ahead and push some of those initiatives through. But you can then have some scenarios in here saying if we were to reduce the turnover figure, so if we're sitting at 14%, if we were to take that down to 12%, what would that save us in costs every year? So that's about $500,000 if we just reduce the turnover figure by 2%. Now, if you want to be really bold and say 5%, then it's 1.2 million. If you want to, completely change the game and reduce that 14 down to 4, it's about a 2.5 million saving. So really simple, but this could be really powerful in terms of you engaging with your internal stakeholders, or just setting your goals from the first instance and doing that thing that's really difficult to do sometimes, which is saying at the end of a strategy or at the end of an initiative, here's where we started, here's where we are, here's how the numbers changed, and here's how much I saved you. So if you're a senior HR person, that might be your rationale for getting a raise, for getting more budget, or to protect the budget that you have each year, saying here's what we're delivering for the business. And I think in most organizations, the cost of people, so the people cost, is around 40% to 60% of all operating costs. So it's a huge investment that businesses make. So this is another tool to have to say, let's get the most out of this investment, and let's make sure that our operating costs are being managed well, and we're providing what seemingly a return on that investment, or a saving on that investment. And to help with things as well, if you want to see how that might translate into something, we've developed this business case template. So again, this is for you to use. We're going to send you this link. It's not the prettiest of things. It's in a nice Word document, but you can pretty it up if you like. But it is a guide on how you can take some of those figures. You can apply our approach and our thinking with our method and present this business case to your internal stakeholders. to get approval for what it is that you're going to do. Now, if you don't need approval, if you've got the license to just go ahead, then it's great still to use a business case, if even for yourself, just to show here's where we started, here's what we're going to do, here's the goals, and here's where we're at the end of it, if you go back and reflect. So we've written this for you in draft format, and we've got some comments here as well that might help you. So we've got these different sections on here, help evaluate or rationalize the problem. And then there's some tooltips here based on what you might enter or customize. We've got some objectives written for you as well. The risks of inaction, which is a big one for senior stakeholders. If you're trying to convince executives to take action on something, there is also the risk of doing nothing. The proposed solution, so we've keyed in there some of the things that Clint spoke about before, if you're going to take this approach of using the 5D method. An implementation plan, so what that might look like, and some guidance around how you might make that clear for those stakeholders if you're wanting them to approve certain things. The things that you might need, the expected outcomes, so you can speculate what they might be in a quantitative or a qualitative form. And then the ROI, so if you use our cost calculator, put in the potential ROI there as well to get that across the line. Next steps, and it's a usual business case after them, but we'll gift this to you in a way to then strengthen your case for tackling this big issue, which usually does need someone to approve or to go ahead or to get their buy-in and say, this is a serious problem hurting us. We know how serious it is. This is what we've done, and this is what we aim to do. And yeah, we'll gift that to you. I'm now seeing I'm kind of rushing a little bit because I realise how much time that we have. This was a simple case study. I don't know if we've got time for it today, but it was the basic story was, here's what happens when you take this seriously. And it was with a client that we worked with who had extraordinary turnover, 70%, and within 6 months we managed to decrease that by 50%, running through this method. And yeah, this is just a basic timeline of how we worked there. But to recap, here's the things that we're going to send you. Look out for the email. We'll be sharing that with you. Now we've got a chance, or we've opened up 3 spots for next month. So starting from next week, actually, if you want to sit down with either Clint or myself and talk about your plan, your challenges, or how you might use the cost calculator or the business case template. And we've opened up 3 spots for anyone on this call who'd like to sit down with us and get some tips and advice. But I realised we were really trying to keep to that half hour. We've actually got some extra time, so we've got 15-20 minutes to stick around and talk about any questions that you might have. So I realised there that we've got 1 minute left. We're trying to keep these sessions real short and real sharp, these masterclasses. But maybe let me ask you a question. What's landed? Is there anything still fuzzy? Are there any challenges